things. One, a copy of, not this exact one, but one similar to this, copy of this flyer, or an PDF link to it. Even if you're not interested, send it to all your friends. Make sure they know. I'm trying to get 6 more MTSU students, 7 more MTSU students, something like that, so I'll get paid to actually teach this course. Otherwise, I won't, but I'll still teach it. It's a great course. The pictures that are on this, by the way, this is the Christ Church College dining hall, which was used as the model for the Great Hall in the Harry Potter films. That's obviously Big Ben Towers of Parliament, Tower Bridge. You flip it over on this side. This is the warming room in Laycock Abbey, which was used for Snape's dungeon. Everybody usually has fun. I try to make sure they don't get caught climbing into this cauldron, because this cauldron is huge. This cauldron is literally about 6 feet in diameter. Okay? This is ENGL Castle, which is important for what we're studying right now, because this is the ancestral home of the Northumberlands, or the Percy family in Northumbria. You go to this, and I take my students here. You go here and you walk into the yard, and there's a big old massive bronze statue of Harry Percy Hotspur, okay, who actually was Prince Hal's age. Okay? In Shakespeare's plays, he was not Prince Hal's age. He was Henry IV's age. In Shakespeare plays with history. That's why you can't read Shakespeare's histories and think you're getting English history, because he telescopes and compresses time, and he changes the ages of individuals. Northumberland, in the play, is actually like the age of Henry Bolingbroke's father. Okay? Harry Percy, his son, nicknamed Hotspur, is the age of Bolingbroke. Bolingbroke's son, Prince Henry, is about 18 to 20 years younger than Hotspur. Okay? But Shakespeare needs a good foil, so he changes the age. So that's ENGL Castle. It's about an hour away from Edinburgh. And then this is the mock-up Hogwarts Castle at the Warner Brothers studio tour, which the actual castle is, the whole thing, a little bit larger than this room. Okay, so when you see external shots and stuff of this, they've got a camera zooming in and going all around the outside. But anyways, it's a really fun course. The other thing was an announcement that was made just last week of the impending publication of a book, Rebellions and Rebels, something else, about a possible source for 11 of Shakespeare's plays. It's a manuscript that dates from about 1585, okay? So it's very contemporaneous with Shakespeare. And it's pretty clear. I've ordered or I had one of my colleagues order a copy for the MTSU library. They're ordering an electronic copy, and I may just break down and shell out $100 and get a hard copy of it. It's a manuscript about rebellion. Okay, rebellion was really in the air in the 1580s, 1590s. Why? Spanish Armada. Spanish Armada wasn't only the Spaniards invading, it also involved rebellion by Catholic lords of the north. Okay? Like the Duke of Northumberland was kind of implicated there. So, I mean, it's a real hot topic. Anyways, there are passages in this manuscript that it's pretty clear from what the two scholars who looked at this manuscript ran it through plagiarism software, and then ran some of Shakespeare's plays through the same plagiarism software. And they pick out multiple kind of echoing phrases, okay? And it's written before any of Shakespeare's plays are written. So it can't be that, the author of the manuscript is ripping off from Shakespeare. It's got to be the other way around. Or not ripping off, but is influenced by, okay? passages from Lear, passages, if I remember right, from Hamlet, some of the comedies, most of the English historical tragedies. This is called a history play, even though the title is The Tragedy of King Richard II, okay, because it deals with English history. And let's kind of begin, and we're going to try to do Richard II kind of quick, okay? Shakespeare wrote 2 series of English histories. They are called tetralogies. Why? Because each one is comprised of 4 plays. The first tetralogy, it's only called the first tetralogy because it's the one he wrote first. Okay? It actually deals with later history than the one he wrote second. So the first tetralogy, it's only first in terms of the chronology of Shakespeare's writing. That is the 3 parts of Henry VI, okay, and then Richard III. He writes that, according to Bevington, somewhere around 1589 to 94. Okay, we're pretty confident about those dates, right? In the historical period it deals with, Henry VI, these are all the dates I have down here for the kings, birth and death dates, not their reigning dates. Okay? If you turn back to A71 and 72 in your appendix, okay, you get the full chronology of the English kings. Okay? So Henry VI, 1421 to 1471, 50 years. Richard III, 1452 to 1485, 33 years. Okay? And, Richard III only reigned for, I think it is 3 years. It's not very long. 2 years. 1483 to 1485. Henry VI, 4th, 5th. Not on that page. It doesn't even show us reigning dates. But they kind of went back and forth a couple of times. Henry VI was essentially lost the kingdom, and then he gained it back for a couple of years, and then Richard III takes over. We're going to talk a little bit more about that. It's the second tetralogy, written from 95 to 99, okay, deals with Richard II, Henry IV, that's Bolingbroke, okay, and then Henry V. Their dates, Richard II, 1367 to 1400. It's in this period, under the kingship of Richard II, that Geoffrey Chaucer writes everything he writes. Okay? He's born in the mid-1340s. He dies in 1400. Chaucer does. Okay? Richard II, 1367 to 1400. Notice again, he's really young, 33. And obviously he doesn't die of a natural old age. There's problems with his death. Henry IV, 1367 to 1413. Notice, same year. So when he deposes, Shakespeare's language, when he deposes Richard II, when he talks to him, as an equal in everything, he's, they're cousins. They're very, very close, right? And close in age also. So 33, he's only 46 when he dies. His son, born 1387, notice 20 years after Richard II, 1387, 1422, 13 and 22, he's only 35 when he dies. Henry V. Yes?
The person who will become Henry VI show up in the last one of the second tetralogy?
No. No, because there's a pretty big gap between here and here in terms of kings. He's not, he doesn't immediately become king upon his death. I don't remember who does. Don't hold me on that. I don't think he does. I don't think he, rules as an infant. Okay? This period is The Wars of the Roses. Take that back. This is included there too. Okay? Because you have the House of Lancaster, the House of York that are involved. Henry IV is actually, or Henry Bolingbroke is obviously Lancaster, right? We see him get exiled. He goes off for a while. His father, John of Gaunt, dies. He comes back. Why? To claim his inheritance. Notice in Shakespeare's telling, he does not come back to claim the kingship. Why? He doesn't have a line to the kingship. He doesn't have an immediate line to the kingship. Okay? Richard II does not have a son. So Bolingbroke is in the line of succession, but he's not in the immediate line of succession. But he comes back to claim his inheritance, to get his titles back, because what has Richard, again, according to Shakespeare, what has Richard done with them? John of Gaunt dies, and what does Richard do? Takes everything. Takes his land, takes what he calls his plate, that is his goods, takes the titles. Bolingbroke comes back and says, I want it back, etc. Okay? So we're going to try to go through this somewhat quickly, and then we'll slow down a little bit for these. I'm trying to figure out in my mind how I can show clips, because I've got the Hollow Crown series, which is a 4-part series of films. Yeah, some of them are better than others, that are this cycle. Okay? Okay, so let's just jump in. Now, your introduction mentions, where is it that he mentions this? Bottom of 740. Bottom of 740 in the left-hand column. He says, you know, when Shakespeare turns to Richard II, the events of the previous century were kind of still fresh on people's minds. And we kind of think, what? How can that be? I mean, we're talking this period, when Shakespeare comes to write the play, we're talking almost 200 years earlier. Okay? But when you've never had a king deposed before, you know, those kinds of things echo. I mean, you still have people in the South, people on my wife's side of the family, for example, refer to that little thing that happened about 140 years ago, 160 years ago, as the War of Northern Aggression. I mean, it's still fresh in their minds. I mean, there are parts of Georgia I don't announce my last name too loudly in. Okay, so the left-hand column says, Richard and Bolingbroke's contest for the English crown provided a sobering example of political wrongdoing and, at least by implication, a rule for political right conduct. One prominent reason for studying history, to an Elizabethan, was to avoid the errors of the past. And remember, George Santayana, early 20th century, said, those who, what? Don't learn from the past, what? Are condemned or doomed to repeat it. So if you don't learn the lessons of the past, you're going to make the same mistakes. You know, see Winston Churchill, mid-1930s. Because in the 30s, he's talking about the problems of Germany rearming, and he's kind of saying, we've done this before, folks. So, skip the next line or sentence and pick up after the colon. Take that back, and we'll just read the whole thing. The relevance of such historical analogy was, in fact, vividly underscored some 6 years after Shakespeare wrote the play. That is, after he writes this play. Okay, he writes this around 95. In 1601, followers of the Earl of Essex commissioned Shakespeare's acting company, okay, the Lord Chamberlain's men, to perform a revived play about Richard II on the eve of what was to be an abortive rebellion. Okay. It wasn't planned to be an abortive rebellion. It was planned to be a successful rebellion. But it got stopped in its tracks. So, notice that. Essex's followers got Shakespeare's company to perform a revived play about Richard II. Probably this one. Okay? Why? Okay, if you assume the Globe fits about 3,000 people per performance, and they're putting on performances every day, okay, you're not going to have the same people coming back and seeing it. Some will, but usually you're going to have different audiences. This is Shakespeare's very early 17th century, late 16th century social media way of getting an idea out there. Okay? Get it in the playhouses. Because people see the plays and then what do? They'll go back to their bars and taverns and pubs. They go back to their places of work and they talk about what they saw. Okay? And what are they going to be talking about? Bolingbroke deposed Richard. So you start getting this replacing the king idea in the air. Well, how old is Queen Elizabeth at this point? 1601. She's old. Okay? She's been queen since 1558. 43 years. She dies in only 2 more years. She dies in 1603. Okay? What's the problem with Queen Elizabeth right now on the throne in 1601? The major problem. She has no heir. There is no stated line of succession. People are concerned about that. Now, people weren't aware that she had been secretly negotiating with a distant relative, King James VI of Scotland, okay, to come down, and become king upon her death, thus uniting the kingdoms of Scotland and England, okay, under one single ruler. So, on the eve of what was to be an abortive rebellion, perhaps with the intention, notice, of inciting a riot. Whether the play was Shakespeare's is not certain, but it seems likely. The acting company was ultimately exonerated. Okay, what that implies, and I don't remember the actual history of this, but it implies that there was some pretty good suspicion about the Lord Chamberlain's men. Were they involved in this rebellion? Because the Earl of Essex was a very powerful man. He wasn't just some hanger-on off in the wings. Okay? He was extremely powerful. He was executed, if I remember correctly. So, the acting company was ultimately exonerated, but not before Queen Elizabeth concluded that she was being compared to Richard II. Okay, so, she thinks, yeah, James is going, that's not good. If she's being compared to Richard II, what's the implication? Needs to be replaced. Right? When he wrote Shakespeare, the play, Shakespeare presumably did not know that it would be used for such a purpose, but he must have known that the overthrow of Richard was, in any case, a controversial subject because of its potential use as a precedent for rebellion. The scene of Richard's deposition was considered so provocative by Elizabeth's government, it was censored in the printed quartos of Shakespeare's play during her lifetime. So, in the early quartos, 4:1 is not there. You just don't include that kind of information or that kind of scene. And Elizabeth wasn't, wasn't very scrupulous when it came to dealing with possible enemies. She had people's tongues cut out who spoke out against her. She had people's hands cut off who wrote out against her. She had people's heads cut off if they annoyed her too much. Okay? So you've got that hanging back. And then he mentions, and we'll talk about this when we get into the play, he mentions, Bevington does, this idea of passive obedience. which I'll talk about when we get into the play. This doctrine of behavior, so to speak, towards one's leaders. So, look at the dramatis persona. Richard II. Okay, what year is this? 1400. It's the last year of his life. It's the last months of his life? We don't know. We don't know how much time passes. And I did not bother to check what year Richard exiled Bolingbroke. Okay? But I'm pretty sure it is the last year. So you have King Richard, you have John of Gaunt, Duke of Lancaster, King Richard's uncle. John of Gaunt was kind of nicknamed the Kingmaker because of how powerful he was. Okay? He was the brother of the previous king. He was one of multiple brothers of the previous king. See, that's the problem. John of Gaunt's father had too many sons. Because you have multiple sons, especially in this time period, as opposed to today. You have multiple sons, and maybe what do they all want? Yeah, I want to be king. But it goes to the eldest son. So you bump off the eldest son, and then it's the next eldest son. You bump off him, and it's... Okay. Go back a few hundred years, when Alfred the Great. Alfred was the fifth son. He never should have become king. He didn't bump off his brothers, however. A couple of them were mentally unable to rule. One of them died in youth. The eldest one became king and died. So, look at here. It's me. Lucky me, What would it take today for Harry, who's about to get married, to become king?
Mess.
A real mess. How big a mess? Charles has to die. Will has to die. Who else? Will's children both have to die. So, family gathering, I'm just not going to be there, boom, and suddenly he becomes king, right? What about Andrew? Charles's younger brother. You got to get rid of all of Charles's kids, and only then would Andrew be able to be. So, John of Gaunt, Duke of Lancaster, very, very powerful, but he's also really old at this time. Okay? Actually, this can't be 1400 when the play opens. Well, take it back, because it's not history.
1398.
Where does it say 1398?
1.1 location, room of state.
Oh, in Windsor. At Windsor in 1398. Okay. Well, Shakespeare, this is more Shakespeare playing with history then, because John of Gaunt was dead in 1398. If my memory serves, and early onset Alzheimer's, may not be. So we open, and King Richard tells Gaunt, "Hast thou, according to thy oath and bond, brought hither Henry Hereford, thy bold son, here to make good the boisterous late appeal, which then our leisure would not let us hear, against the Duke of Norfolk?" So the play opens with what already going on? Turmoil. There's division among the ranks, so to speak. Okay? So John of Gaunt says, yes, I have ordered him to. So Bolingbroke comes in, and how does he address Richard? With all the proper terms of state. He addresses him as a superior. Okay. Mowbray, Duke of Norfolk, comes in, does the same. So King Richard says, all right, you two, what are your charges against each other? What's your beef with each other? And Bolingbroke says a few things, and I want to pick up on line 35. Okay? He says, now, Thomas Mowbray, do I turn to thee. and mark my greeting well. For what I speak, my body shall make good upon this earth, or my divine soul answer it in heaven. So what is it he's going to answer for in heaven or make good on earth? Thou art a traitor and a miscreant. It's kind of like miscreated. Wow, that's pretty low. Too good to be so, and too bad to live. Too good meaning too noble. You shouldn't be like this. And too bad to live. That is, and not worth sucking more air. Since the more fair and crystal is the sky, the uglier seem the clouds that in it fly. Once more, the more to aggravate the note, that is, to pile on, with a foul traitor's name stuff I thy throat. In which, so please my sovereign, ere I move, what my tongue speaks, my right drawn sword may prove. That is, before we leave here, I will prove it on thee. How does he mean? Is he going to pull out witnesses? No, he's talking prove trial by combat. The old medieval notion, God will favor the right. And the person who wins, that's who God favors. Okay? Those of you in my 3010 course, we saw Beowulf essentially say the same thing before he fights Grendel. So, Mowbray responds, picking up with 54. First, the fair reverence of your highness, talking to Richard, curbs me from giving reins and spurs to my free speech. That is, because I'm in your presence, I can't really say what I'd like to say. Which else would post until it had returned. These terms of treason doubled down his throat. Setting aside his high blood's royalty. Why? Because Henry Bolingbroke, as I said, is in a line of succession to the throne. He's cousin to the king. Norfolk is not. Okay? So he's kind of saying, and even when I talk about him, I've got to be careful what I say. And let him be no kinsman to my liege. That is, okay, Richard, cut off all blood relation to him. I do defy him, and I spit at him. Call him a slanderous coward and a villain. And you can go all Monty Python with this if you really wanted to, because it opens itself up for it. I do defy him and spit at him, call him a slanderous coward and a villain, which to maintain, that is to prove, I would allow him odds and meet him. That is, I would give him odds, like in betting. Norfolk is really boasting here. Okay? It's almost like he's saying, and to make it even, I'll fight him one-handed. And meet him were I tied to run afoot even to the frozen ridges of the Alps, or any other ground inhabitable wherever Englishman durst set his foot. In other words, name the time and place. Bolingbroke throws down his gage, his armored gauntlet or glove. It's not just a cowhide glove. It's a glove with metal plates on it. So he throws it down. That's a challenge. To defend your honor for a medieval knight, you got to pick it up. You can't not pick it up. If you don't pick it up, it means you're not worthy of the title knight. Okay? In a later scene, we're going to see guys throwing down gauntlets left and right. I mean, there's going to be a pile of them, essentially. So, he throws down his gauntlet. Pale, trembling coward, there I throw my gage, disclaiming here the kindred of the king, and lay aside my high blood's royalty, which fear not reverence makes thee to accept. In other words, you're not revering my noble blood, you're afraid of me. If guilty dread I've left thee so much strength as to take up mine honor's pawn, then stoop. By that and all the rights of knighthood, else will I make good against thee arm to arm what I have spoke or thou canst worst devise. So, Mowbray accepts the challenge. I take it up, and by that sword I swear, which gently laid my knighthood on my shoulder, the sword he's swearing on is Richard's. Richard's the one who makes him a knight. I'll answer thee in any fair degree or chivalrous design of knightly trial. That is, whatever form of combat. It might be in the lists, jousting. It might be with sword. It might be with mace. It might be hand to hand. So, Richard says, what's the charge? What doth our cousin lay to Mowbray's charge? And notice, he's got multiple charges. Okay? One, that he got money and he used it improperly, but I want to pick up with line 98. Further, I say, and further will maintain upon his bad life to make all this good, he did plot the Duke of Gloucester's death. Suggest his soon believing adversaries, and consequently, like a traitor coward, sluiced out his innocent soul through streams of blood. Okay? So, he's saying he was a conspirator in the death of Gloucester. He's not saying Mowbray personally did the assassination. Okay? Mowbray says, let my sovereign turn away his face and bid his ears a little while be deaf. In other words, don't listen to this. Put your ears and go, nah. Till I have told this slander of his blood, how God and good men hate so foul a liar. So Mowbray says, I'm impartial. Excuse me, the king says, I'm impartial. Doesn't matter that we're related. Impartial are our eyes and ears. Were he my brother, nay, my kingdom's heir. As he is but my father's brother's son, now by my scepters all I make a vow. Such neighbor nearness to our sacred blood should nothing privilege him nor partialize the unstooping firmness of my upright soul. He's our subject, Mowbray, so art thou. Free speech and fearless, I to thee allow. Now, free speech, that's kind of interesting because they didn't really have it. He's saying, speak freely. Don't fear any consequences. So, listen to Mowbray's speech. Pick up with 132. For Gloucester's death, I slew him not. Now that's pretty categorical. Wasn't me. But, to my own disgrace, neglected my sworn duty in that case. What does he mean?
I didn't do anything about it.
I didn't stop it either. The implication is, I knew about it, but I didn't stop it. Okay? He turns to John of Gaunt. For you, my noble lord of Lancaster, the honorable father to my foe, once did I lay in ambush for your life. Okay? He's admitting here to openly plotting against John of Gaunt. A trespass that doth vex my grieved soul. But ere I last received the sacrament, I did confess, that is, before I last had communion, I confessed it and exactly begged your grace's pardon, and I hope I had it. That is, and I came to you and told you, and you pardoned me. This is my fault. As for the rest appeals, it issues from the rancor of a villain, a recreant most degenerate traitor, which in myself I boldly will defend and interchange with. So he throws down his gauntlet. Okay? Richard, wrath kindled gentlemen, be ruled by me. Okay? What are they being ruled by? Before Richard says this. Emotion. Their anger. Okay? Their wrath. So now he's saying, be ruled. Control yourselves. Let's purge this choler, this anger, without letting blood. Let's find a way peacefully to resolve this issue. This we prescribe, though no physician. Deep malice makes too deep incision. Well, how deep of incisions do they want to make in each other? Forget, forgive, conclude, and be agreed. David, you've got a funny look on your face. What's Richard saying? Get over it's one way of putting it. Rodney King famously said, and after the 1990, what is it, 2, 3, 4, whatever year it was, riots in LA, can't we all just get along? Can't we just make up and be friends? Why so much hate and hostility in the world? Can't Donald Trump and Kim Jong-un just, have some tea and crumpets and be nice to each other? That's what Richard is essentially saying. Okay? What's this tell us about Richard? Naive? A fool? Good uncle, let this end where it begun. We'll calm the Duke of Norfolk, you your son. That is, take your son off, calm him down. I'll calm down the Duke of Norfolk. Gaunt. To be of make peace shall become my age. That is, to be a peacemaker is what I will spend my old age on. Throw down my son, the Duke of Norfolk's gage. That is, drop it. As long as he's holding it, challenge accepted. Notice what Gaunt is asking his son to do. Be the first one to say, I give. Richard, Norfolk, throw down. We bid. There is no boot. Notice your gloss. There is no help for it. Okay? We bid. That is, I'm asking you. Turn to the next page. Mowbray kneels. Myself I throw, dread sovereign, at thy foot. My life thou shalt command, but not my shame. He's going to go on and say what? Essentially, you can take my life. You cannot take my honor. The one my duty owes, that is, my life. But my fair name, despite of death that lives upon my grave, to dark dishonor's use thou shalt not have. What was his name? I think it was Ray Donovan, not the HBO series. One of Ronald Reagan's secretaries of labor was accused of some malfeasance, some crime, okay? Like 1984, 1985. Was proven to be innocent. And after his name was dragged through the mud by the press and the Democrats, he famously said, where do I go to get my reputation back? Okay? Because his reputation was in tatters. I am disgraced, impeached, and baffled here. Let's see what he says for baffled. 170. Publicly dishonored and baffled here. Lost my place. Pierced to the soul with slander's venomed spear. Implication is, and you expect me to just let that go? You expect me to just say, okay, he didn't really mean it. He's sorry. That's fine. Richard, rage must be withstood. Stood against. Give me his gage. Lions make leopards tame. Lions. Well, the royal symbol is a rampant lion. That is, a rampant on its hind legs with front paws like this. Leopard was the symbol of the Duke of Mowbray. What's Richard saying? Down, boy. Lions kill leopards. Mowbray, yes, but not change his spots. Yes, you can tame me, but you can't make me change from what I am. Take but my shame and I resign my gage. That is, okay, you, Richard, you take my shame. You take the charges Bolingbroke leveled at me. You think Richard's going to do that? No, he's not. My dear, dear Lord, the purest treasure mortal times afford is spotless reputation. Notice that again. The purest treasure, mortal times. Here on earth, we only live a short, some of these guys, a very short while. And he's saying what? All we can get in this short time is our good name.
I can't translate into Australian English.
That away, take away the good name, men are but gilded loam or painted clay. Just shows to me Shakespeare's beautiful imagery. Gilded loam. What's loam? Dirt. What's gilded? Covered in gold. Scrape away the gold and what do you have? Dirt. Painted clay. That is, clay painted to look like
Something it's not.
something it's not. Brass, gold, silver. So, reputation gets at what? Gets at the essence of a person. Mowbray is saying, mine honor is my life. Both grow in one. Take honor from me, my life is done. Then, dear my liege, mine honor let me try. He doesn't mean, let me see if I can do it. He's saying, let me prove it on him. In that I live. That is, I live in honor. And for that, for honor, I will die. Now, a theme that runs all throughout all four of these plays. Honor. What is it? Because we're going to see in Henry IV, Falstaff's going to say, honor is a mere escutcheon. What's an escutcheon? Like a trademark symbol. It's a decoration. Okay? If it's a mere decoration, then what can it be done? What can you do with it? You can put it on and take it off. Not according to Mowbray. Not according later on to Hotspur. Okay? So, Richard turns to Bolingbroke. Cousin, throw up your gauge. Do you begin? That is, he's kind of saying, teach Mowbray how to do it. Come on, pick it up. Oh, God, defend my soul from such deep sin. Ere my tongue shall wound my honor with such feeble wrong, or sound so base a parle, my teeth shall tear the slavish motive of recanting fear, and spit it bleeding in his high disgrace. For shame doth harbor even in Mowbray's face. Richard, we were not born to sue, but to command. He's kind of remembering himself here. I'm the king, damn it. Do what I tell you to do. Sue means to beg. Okay? So he says, fine. Fine. You want to kill each other? Fine. Coventry, St. Lambert's Day. Be there. So, we see John of Gaunt, Act 1, Scene 2, come in and speak with the Duchess. Who's the Duchess? The wife of dead Gloucester. Okay? And Gaunt says, I'm going to pick up a little bit, line 6 or so. Put we our quarrel to the will of heaven, who, when they see the hours ripe on earth, will rain hot vengeance on offenders' heads. Put we our quarrel, our disputation, to God. He's saying, essentially, it's all part of God's will. The Duchess. Stupid thing. Finds brotherhood in thee no sharper spur. We don't really need to read much more of what she says here, because she is saying, what is John of Gaunt's duty? To his family. To his brother, she's saying. Hath love in thy old blood no living fire? Edward's 7 sons, whereof thyself art one, were as 7 vials of his sacred blood. or 7 fair branches springing from one root. Some of those 7 are tried by nature's courts. That is, they died on their own, natural deaths. Some of those branches by the destinies cut, killed in war and such. But Thomas, my dear Lord, my Gloucester, one vial full of Edward's sacred blood, one flourishing branch of his most royal root, is cracked, and all the precious liquor spilt. You owe him. By envy's hand and murder's bloody axe, Gaunt, his blood was thine. She's saying, and, as John Donne is going to say in one of his Meditation 17, one man's death, every man's death, diminishes me. When your brother died, Gaunt, you were diminished, she says. His blood was thine. And though thou livest and breathest, yet art thou slain in him. Call it not patience, Gaunt. Skipping a few more lines. It is despair in suffering thus thy brother to be slaughtered. She's saying, suck it up, old man. He can barely lift a sword at this point in his life. Okay? That which in mean, line 33, that which in mean men we entitle patience, mean, base, low, common, is pale, cold cowardice in noble breasts. Be a man. Show your honor. Avenge my Gloucester's death. Gaunt. God's is the quarrel. That is, Thomas Woodstock, his brother, his death, okay, it's for God to deal with. For God substitute Richard II, his deputy anointed in his sight. Anointed in his sight means the coronation ceremony, where you have the Archbishop of Canterbury place the crown on the head, showing both civil and ecclesiastical authority put in the king. Okay? His deputy anointed in his sight hath caused his death. Notice what Gaunt is saying there. It's not Mowbray. His son thinks it's Mowbray that's responsible for Gaunt's brother's death. Gaunt is saying the king's the one responsible. The which, if wrongfully, let heaven revenge. That is, if he wrongfully caused the death of my brother, let heaven avenge my brother's death. For I may never lift an angry arm against his minister. Divine right of kings? Yeah, though that idea or that phrase doesn't come around for another couple hundred years or so. Okay? But he is, and Shakespeare is well aware of this passage in the book of Romans, all government is instituted by God. Therefore, obey those in charge. St. Paul. So, Shakespeare is aware of that, and he has John of God aware of that. Duchess, where then, alas, may I complain myself? What does she mean? Look at your footnote. Where may I lodge a complaint on my behalf? She's kind of saying, okay, so does that mean I go up to the nearest church door and lodge a complaint against God? How do you go, okay, God, Book of Revelation, the souls of the righteous under the altar. What do? How long? Okay. Stop the mercy. Rain, hail, fire, and brimstone down on. Where then may I complain myself to God, the widow's champion and defense? That's it. That's this right here. Passive obedience. He is God's divinely appointed ruler. I can do nothing against him. If he murdered your husband, you got to take it up with God. Okay? She goes, fine, I will. So, skip a bunch. Act 1, Scene 3. We arrive at Coventry. We see Bolingbroke and all the others show up. And Richard addresses them, line 124. Okay. So we've had the marshal say, here's, the Earl of Hereford, Bolingbroke, blah, 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 blah. And the other one says, here's the Earl of Norfolk, Thomas Mowbray, blah, 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 blah. Are you guys ready? Get ready. 1, 2, and Richard interrupts them. He throws down his baton. And he says, has them ride up. So they're standing in front of him now. He says, okay, here's what I've decided. For that our kingdom's earth should not be soiled with that dear blood which it hath fostered, and for our eyes do hate the dire aspect of civil wounds ploughed up with neighbour's sword. And for we think the eagle-winged pride of sky-aspiring and ambitious thoughts with rival-hating envy set on you to wake our peace, which in our country's cradle draws the sweet infant breath of gentle sleep, which so roused up with boisterous, untuned drums with harsh blah, 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 I banish you. Okay? He says, therefore we banish you our territories, 139. You, cousin Hereford, upon pain of life, till twice 5 summers have enriched our field, shall not regreet our fair dominions, but tread the stranger paths of banishment. 10 years exile for Bolingbroke. He says, your will be done. Notice, he doesn't argue. Yes, liege. So then he turns to Norfolk. You, however, he says, thy sly, slow hours shall not determinate the dateless limit of thy dear exile. You can't come back ever. You are exiled for good. The hopeless word of never to return. Listen to Mowbray's response, because, man, this is just beautiful. How he understands this. Line 159. The language I have learned these 40 years, my native English, now I must forego. And now my tongue's use is to me no more than an unstringed viol or a harp, or like a cunning instrument cased up, or being open put into his hands that knows no touch to tune the harmony. Within my mouth you have enjailed my tongue, doubly portcullised with my teeth and lips, and dull and feeling barren ignorance is made my jailer. In other words, by banishing me for life, you are not allowing me what? To ever use my native English again. Where's he going to speak English? In France, in Germany, in Italy, in Spain, in Portugal. Richard, it boots thee not to be compassionate. After our sentence plaining comes too late. Take it like a man. This won't help you at all. Okay? So, Richard says, oh, come back. You got to promise one more thing. Okay? He holds his sword out. He says, place your hands. They place their hands on his sword. Swear by the duty that you owe to God, our part therein we banish with yourselves, to keep the oath that we administer. You never shall, so help you truth and God, embrace each other's love and banishment. What has he just said? Don't be reconciled in banishment. I thought, it was good to be a peacemaker. I thought it was good to overcome disagreements and make peace. I mean, it's what he said earlier. He said, come on, forget, forgive. Now, live the rest of your lives in enmity. Hate each other. You shall never embrace each other's love and banishment, nor ever look upon each other's face, nor ever write, regret, nor reconcile, nor never by advised purpose meet to plot, contrive, or complot any ill. against us, our state, or subjects, or our land. What does this oath that he administers show on Richard's part? Is this his politic wiles? Is this his, diplomatic smarts? Okay, you can maybe say that. But what else does it show? Paranoia? Fear? Because what's he implying? I'm afraid you guys are going to go away. You're going to go to France. You're going to go to Germany. And you're going to meet up, halfway in between, like in Strasbourg, right on the border of France and Germany. And you will what? Plot against me. So you can't do that. Promise. Swearing to God.
Which implies he did something wrong for them to plot against him.
Okay. Well, notice, he kind of introduces the idea of plotting against them. Like, not saying it is this way, but he says this, and maybe Bolingbroke gets ready to write off, and he's like, there's an idea. Go away and plot against. So, Bolingbroke, before he leaves, tells Mowbray, confess thy treasons ere thou fly the realm. Since thou hast far to go, bear not along the clogging burden of a guilty soul. Does he want him to confess his treason so that he will then be executed here? No. He wants him to confess his treasons. Why? To unburden his soul. Mowbray, no, I'm not a traitor. Okay. Do we find out by the end of the play, did Mowbray kill Gloucester? We do find out. No, he didn't. Is he implicated in the conspiracy? Yes, he is. Did he do anything to stop the murder of Gloucester? No, he didn't. Okay? So, Richard sees that Gaunt is, nearly destroyed by the long banishment of his son. And he says to Henry Bolingbroke, your father's tears have washed away some of the years. Now you only have to stay 6 years away. Okay? So, Mowbray leaves, and Richard says to Gaunt, when Gaunt says, 10 years, 6 years, he's dead to me, because I'm going to be dead before he returns. Richard says, why, uncle, thou hast many years to live, but not a minute, king, that thou canst give. In other words, you're powerful. You're not that powerful. Shorten my days, thou canst with sullen sorrow, and pluck nights for me, but not lend tomorrow. Thou canst help time to furrow me with age, but stop no wrinkle in his pilgrimage. Thy word is current with him for my death, but dead thy kingdom cannot buy my breath. Richard says, thy son is banished upon good advice. Whereto thy tongue a party verdict get. In other words, I asked your advice and you suggested this. Why at our justice seemst thou then to lour? Why now do you find fault with it? Things sweet to taste prove in digestion sour. Sweet to taste, he's saying the idea of banishment was good. The practice of it, however, no. You urged me as a judge, but had I had rather you would have bid me argue like a father. In other words, as a judge, what are supposedly judges supposed to be? Impartial. Okay? He's saying, I wish rather you'd ask me like a father. Why? Because fathers aren't supposed to be impartial. Fathers aren't supposed to say, no, you banish my son and this other guy equally. Fathers would say, no, banish the bad guy, let my son stay. Okay? So, Gaunt and Bolingbroke talk, and Gaunt tells him, 275, All places that the eye of heaven visits are to a wise man ports and happy havens. Okay, you're going to leave here. Be wise and realize wherever you go, what? Can be a port and happy haven. Teach thy necessity to reason thus. There is no virtue like necessity. He's saying, make a virtue of necessity. If you can't fight fate, find a way to make it work for you. Think not the king did banish thee, but thou the king. In other words, you're going off to these other places is your way of banishing the king. Notice the implication of his words, though. Banishing the king. Go, say I sent thee forth to purchase honor, and not the king exile thee. Or suppose devouring pestilence hangs in our air, and thou art flying to a fresher clime. Again, notice the imagery. What's he suggesting in a fictitious faction about England? It's louder.
It's not really a great place anymore.
It's not healthy. Okay? It's a plague of It's a place of pestilence and plague. Well, if it's a place of pestilence and plague, following the whole idea of the great chain of being, that's because something is wrong. For gnarling sorrow, line 292, hath less power to bite the man that mocks at it and sets it light. Bolingbroke. Who can hold a fire in his hand by thinking on the frosty Caucasus? In other words, okay, Dad, I get your point, but really? Who can cloy the hungry edge of appetite by bare imagination of a feast? Have you ever been really, really hungry before and you haven't had any food, so that just thinking about food make those hunger pangs go away? No! Bolingbroke says, or wallow naked in December snow by thinking on a fantastic summer's heat. No, the apprehension of the good. Apprehension, the understanding of it up here, gives but the greater feeling to the worse. Okay? Act 1, Scene 4. King Richard, 23 or so. He's talking to Bushy Badget and Green, and he's talking about Bolingbroke, and how Bolingbroke, who's now been banished, has won over the hearts and minds of the common people. He says, Bushy Badget here and Green, observed his courtship to the common people. Notice his courtship, his wooing of the common people. How he did seem to dive into their hearts with humble and familiar courtesy. What reverence he did throw away on slaves, wooing poor craftsmen with the craft of smiles, and patient underbearing of his fortune, as 'twere to banish their effects with him. What's he talking about? Okay, first of all, again, what is the relationship of Bolingbroke to commoners? He's royalty. Okay? Off goes his bonnet to an oyster wench, a woman who digs oysters. A brace of draymen bid God speed him well, and had the tribute of his supple knee. And he does what? He takes a knee to him. He bows to the cart drivers. What's this showing us about Bolingbroke? Good politician. Good retail politics, you know. This is the guy who shows up at the Rotary Club breakfasts and meets everybody. Even though, at this point, apparently, he's not a quote-unquote politician. Okay? So what's this telling us about Bolingbroke? He genuinely what?
Cares about the people.
Cares about the people. He respects the commoners. What's it then tell us about Richard?
He doesn't.
They're the riffraff. The little people. With thanks, my countrymen, my loving friends. That's what he says when he bends his knee to the cart drivers. As were our England in reversion his, and he our subjects next degree in hope. Next degree in hope means future king. Okay? Green, well, he's gone. Off with him go these thoughts. That is, he's banished. You don't need to worry about him anymore. The king's like, you're right. So let's think about this war. What war? War with Ireland. The English, seemingly, have always been at war with the Ireland. In the 1590s, they were at war with Ireland. I mean, Queen Elizabeth had kind of subdued Ireland, not all that well. Edmund Spencer had been sent over as a secretary to Ireland in the 80s. He hated it, wrote about it. Okay? So he says, to finance this war, what's he going to do? Okay, but it's before that. Look at those lines beginning with 43. For our coffers with too great a court and liberal largesse are grown somewhat light. Now notice what he just admitted. The royal treasuries are empty. Why? Because of too great a court. He's feeding too many mouths. Why? Why does he have such a large court? What does the large court, the large number of hangers-on imply? A little bit. Okay. Keep going. Why does he have all these hangers-on? The more
He
important.
doesn't have an heir.
Well, that, the more important I am. The more number of followers you have, the more important you are. We're going to see in King Lear. Lear, when he gives up the throne, wants to have 100 knights attend to him. And at one point, he goes to one of his daughter's houses, and his daughter says, why 100? Come on, why do you need 100? How about 75? No, take that back, 50. He goes for another daughter, she goes, no, I'm not going to get none. You can have 25. And then she finally comes down to, what need you even 10? And Lear says famously, reck not the need. Reck, consider, think. It's not about need he's getting at. Okay? He has this huge court because it feeds his narcissism. Okay? He doesn't have the media like a modern president does. Well, not the current one, but, you know. So he says, in liberal largesse. What's largesse? Doling out goodies. It's the goodie bags you get at parties. These goodie bags, however, are full of gold, not, trinkets you buy from the dollar store. They're full of gold, they're full of all kinds of wealth and such. That's why, as king, the royal treasury is poor. So what's he going to do? Therefore, we are enforced to farm our royal realm. The farm is actually rent it out in lease. Okay? The revenue whereof shall furnish us for our affairs in hand. If that comes short, if leasing out the royal properties comes short, our substitutes at home shall have blank charters. What's a blank charter? Blank checks. Fill in the amount. To do what? Whereto, when they shall know what men are rich, they shall subscribe them for large sums of gold. That is, they'll go to that rich man, Andrew Poulsen, give him that blank charter. Andrew will then give over what gold he has. And what does that blank charter now say? I owe you. It's like a government bond. What's it really worth? They shall subscribe them for large sums of gold and send them after to supply our wants. This is why later on, who is it? It's either Northumberland or Bolingbroke, calls Richard, you're not the King of England. You're the landlord. In England's a tenement. You've merely rented it out. Okay? We find out John of Gaunt is sick. And Richard says, now put it God in the physician's mind to help him to his grave immediately. That is, help his physician kill him. Why? The lining of his coffer shall make coats to deck our soldiers. The lining of his coffers. Like the felt lining inside treasure chests. He is suggesting. Okay? But he means, that's figuratively. He means literally, his gold will pay for what I need. So John of Gaunt comes in, sick. And he's hoping, speaking to York, he's hoping his words, now that he's dying, like his dying deathbed words, will have some effect on Richard. Why? Because the words he had in life didn't do any good. Richard never listened. And Gaunt says, he gives this long, beautiful speech. This is one of the most famous speeches from this play. Talking about England. Line 40. This royal throne of kings, this sceptered isle, this earth of majesty, this seat of Mars. Seat. The home of Mars, god of war. Okay? This other Eden. Well, there was one Eden. This is another one. Demi-paradise. This fortress built by nature for herself against infection in the hand of war. How is it a fortress built by nature for herself? What is England surrounded by? Water. The English Channel is like a moat. England has only been successfully invaded once by William the Conqueror. The Isle of Britain has been successfully invaded, before then, but England only once. This happy breed of men, this little world. Shakespeare loves the image of the macrocosm, microcosm. This little world, everything that the world has is right here. It's like what Samuel Johnson says about London. When a man is tired of London, he is tired of life. Why? For there is in London all that life can afford. Okay? Same thing could be said by Gaunt about England. So he says, this precious stone set in the silver sea, which serves it in the office of a wall. The sea serves like a wall, or as a moat defensive to a house against the envy of less happier lands. This blessed plot, this earth, this realm, this England, this nurse, this teeming womb of royal kings. He's thinking, going back and back in history. Feared by their breed and famous by their birth. Feared by their breed means feared by their breeding, by their ancestry, their heritage. They're not feared by the people of England. Who are they feared by? The people across the sea. France. Ireland. Renowned for their deeds as far from home, for Christian service and true chivalry, as is the sepulchre and stubborn Jewry of the world's ransom, blessed Mary's Son, this land of such dear souls, this dear, dear land, dear for her reputation through the world, what is now leased out. He's kind of saying, I've been a protector. He hasn't been the protector, but he's been a protector of this land. And what's it come down to? It's now merely leased out. I die pronouncing it like to a tenement or pelting farm. England, bound in with the triumphant sea, whose rocky shore beats back the envious siege of watery Neptune, is now bound in with shame. It's almost like shame can't escape. So it just bubbles up with inky blots and rotten parchment bonds. The rotten parchment bonds, those blank charters that he was talking about, they're what? Worthless. Okay? That England that was wont to conquer others hath made a shameful conquest of itself. The king comes in, and Gaunt addresses him. And Richard says, what? Can sick men play so nicely with their name? He says, no. Since thou dost seek to kill my name in me, I mock my name, great king, to flatter thee. To kill my name in me, what's he mean? Well, you banished my son. He won't have my name. So, God says, you're actually the one dying, even though I'm the sicker. Richard's like, how do you figure? He that made me knows I see thee ill. God knows how ill you are. What does he mean? How is Richard ill?
He's sick with greed and pride.
Sick with greed and pride. He's a narcissist. That's what he's sick with. What does he not see? The people. Why was he so jealous of Bolingbroke getting the acclaim of the people? Because he never did anything to earn the acclaim of the people. All right? Thy deathbed is no lesser than thy land, wherein thou liest in reputation sick. He's saying the people don't love you, king. The people don't respect you, king. And thou, too careless patient as thou art, commits thy anointed body to the cure of those physicians that first wounded thee. Who's the physician that wounded him? All the yes men that he surrounded himself with. All the people who praise him up one side and down. Oh yeah, let's go fight this war against Ireland. Let's tax the people so that they're penniless. Good idea. So he says, O had thy grandsire, line 104, with a prophet's eye, seen how his son's son should destroy his sons, from forth thy reach he would have laid thy shame, deposing thee before thou wert possessed. If your grandfather could see what you are doing, he would have stopped you from becoming king. Why, cousin, wert thou regent of the world, it were a shame to let this land by lease. But for thy world enjoying but this land, is it not more than shame to shame it so? Landlord of England, art thou now not king? Okay? God is borne off by his attendants, and he dies. We'll pick up there about line 146 or 147 on Thursday. And we'll finish